Yes, it's moving. Let's hope that works. Good morning. How lovely to see you. Those who don't know me, I'm Ruth, and I am quite often at St Michael's Church of a Sunday morning working with the families and young people there. So that's why you don't often see me here. So it's great to be able to spend a morning with you, because Guy's doing an all-age service. So how great is that? Lucky him. Right, so actually today, unusually for me, I have things written out because we are continuing our journey through the Rebirthing of God, the John Philip Newell book, which John introduced last week. And I wanted to be true to him, as well as give you some of my interpolations, ideas, which I'll hopefully make obvious which bits are him, they're the sensible bits, and which bits are me, which are probably a bit less sensible. Okay, so we are thinking about reconnecting with the wisdom of other faiths, or even connecting, because I'm not sure we ever connected in the first place. And throughout all of this book, Newell talks about the idea of being on a journey, a pilgrimage. He links it to the pilgrimage around the island of Iona. He was a warden there for the Iona community for a number of years. So it's in that context that we are looking at these various ideas, in the idea that we are travelling, we are on a journey. We share the planet, which is also on its journey, of course, with over 7 billion people. I looked at the world population clock this morning, 7.3 billion people and counting. And uncountable numbers of faith traditions. Again, thanks to the wonderful Wikipedia, I can tell you that there were, a couple of years ago, 2.2 billion Christians, 1.6 billion people following various branches of Islam, just over 1 billion people who consider themselves secular or non-religious, and 1 billion Hindus, and many, many more. And of course, within each of those faiths, there are different strands. And it is really important, is it not, that we actually all learn to live with each other without blowing up the planet. That is kind of the basic minimum, I feel, of connecting with other faiths. Actually not shooting each other is a good start. But is there more to it than that? And for John Philip Newell, there most certainly is. And he has this lovely quote at the beginning of his chapter: "The historic religions of the world are given not to compete with one another, but to complete each other." Not to compete with each other, but to complete each other. Which is, for many Christians, I know, and no doubt for other religions as well, a very, very provocative idea. Although it is actually one that's been around for quite a long time. So it's maybe not a new idea, but Newell unpacks it in a way which enables all faiths, in his view, to be part of the spiritual journey of the whole of humanity. Maybe. I first encountered this whole idea that being in communication, in dialogue with other faiths, was actually important for my faith when I was at theological college. One of the few good things that came from theological college was a series of lectures given by Bishop Kenneth Cragg, who was a sometime Bishop of Egypt, Anglican Bishop of Egypt, when there was such a thing. He was actually from Lancashire and had his first curacy in Birkenhead, so there is a local connection there as well, and was a good man. But he always used the phrase "iron sharpens iron" from Proverbs, and says we need other faiths, Christianity needs other faiths in order to interrogate our own faith, in order to sharpen our ideas. And he gave the example, one of the examples he gave was that of Judaism, and he said Judaism is people are expecting a Messiah. How do we then understand our Messiah, if you like, Christ, the Christ? Has he arrived or not? What is the nature of Christian hope? And it is by listening to our fellow Abrahamic faith travellers the Jewish people, in all the different strands of Judaism that there are, that we can begin to understand a bit better our own faith. His argument was that when you're ordained, you take vows that you will remain faithful, that this is your faith. He says, well, how do we actually know that we can take those? Because we want to keep questioning. And one of the ways we can do that is to allow other faiths to question us. But Newell would see the encounter between the two faiths in probably a more inclusive way. And he recognises a desire for reconnection with inherent wisdom that goes both into our own soul, which is part of our journey, so you'll encounter other parts of this in the other talks that are given. So the inherent wisdom that is both inward in ourselves and our own traditions, but also outward towards what he calls the neglected lands and undiscovered ways of seeing and other religious inheritances. And he links this whole idea to pilgrimage, sees the Abrahamic faiths particularly as being on pilgrimage. It's a key image in our scriptures, in our faith. And he makes the point that Christianity is no longer a young, defensive religion. We don't need to set firm boundaries to say this is us because we're being persecuted. We have surely grown to maturity in 2,000 years. And as a sign of our maturity, he wants us to make our offering to the world, not in terms of conversion, but in terms of gift of Christianity. And he says, in the same way that, come in, welcome, hi. Oh, it's Ashley. Hello, do come, sit down, join us. In exactly the same way that he says that the Hindus have given to the world the idea of namaste, you know, the greeting. The namaste, which means I recognise the divine light within you and within all people. And he says, wouldn't it have been wonderful if Christianity could have had a similar tradition? And that when we encountered other faiths, other peoples, we could have said, namaste, I recognise the divine light within you. And it would be such a counter to this colonialising impulse that went along with so much Christian mission and resulted in the denigration or the destruction of so many other religious traditions. And he was thinking in particular the context of the First Nations in Canada. And saying, wouldn't it be great if when we first encountered what we might call Native American or First Nations traditions, we had discovered earth spirituality centuries ago instead of waiting till now, basically. Well, not quite now, but you know what I mean, don't you? And I want to ask, you know, what challenges you? What challenges us? I'm constantly challenged by the Muslim calls to prayer. At least I was when I was in Toxteth, where you heard them. And, you know, this idea of praying 3 or even 5 times a day, of reconnecting with the divine at certain points in the day, every day, and making this your tradition. The Jewish emphasis on rituals in the home and the importance of that. What are our rituals in the home which actually draw attention to the divine presence with us? The Sikh langar, I think it's pronounced, of daily hospitality, of offering food to strangers, of Buddhist mindfulness, which, as you know, is a big part of my life and comes from the Buddhist tradition. For Newell, this is not syncretism. In other words, it's not just a mishmash of religions. Think the way that the Roman Catholic faith has happened in places in South America, where it has become something other and something of its own. Very colourful and wonderful, by the way, but probably not what the Catholic Church was intending. But it's a bringing together, sorry, this is where I quote, it's a bringing together of what had developed separately but could be richer in relationship. And he uses the metaphor of marriage. So in marriage, each one maintains their own identity. And isn't it great, the vote in Ireland, by the way? I just say that as an aside. Yes! Roll on referendum here. Anyway, whether we'd be as open-minded is another. Anyway, I digress. But You know, each maintains their own identity, but there's something richer and bigger going on there as well. And he says, let's use that metaphor for other religious traditions. And particularly, Newell sees this richness of coming together in the traditions of East and West. And he quotes people like Bede Griffiths, or we might think of people like Tony DeMello, might think of John Main, who founded the World Community for Christian Meditation, which I'm part of, and which, you know, whose work we use every week at our Wednesday chill out. He sees the West as bringing a dowry. I love this way of thinking of it, the dowry of the appreciation of the uniqueness of the individual on the one hand, and the East bringing an appreciation of the oneness of which each is part. That's his argument, or his thought. And of course, that reminds you so much of some of the mystics like Meister Eckhart. You know, seeing, you know, if I looked long enough at nature, I'd never have to write another sermon. What a great idea. And let me bring you, I will read you one quote from this book, page 49. What is it that the East brings to this marriage? What is it that the West carries in its dowry? The West never forgets the transcendence of the sacred, the otherness of the divine. Always what cannot be said about God is greater than what can be said. So the West is strong at not confusing us with God, not forgetting that everything we essentially are is pure grace. The East, on the other hand, never forgets the immanence of the divine, the withinness of the sacred. The deeper we move in any created thing, the closer we come to the one who is the soul within all souls, the life within all life. The East focuses on the sacredness of all life. And I would want to say also, as a little counter to that maybe, I would want to say that the Western kind of understanding of the incarnation of the divine can helpfully be brought into play with the Eastern idea, or certainly the Buddhist idea, of non-attachment. Matter matters, George MacLeod said. And in having a respect for the incarnation, we understand that actually bodies are important. And that is hugely important for those who are often denigrated, women, children, who are very vulnerable in many Eastern traditions, as they have been also in Christianity. Let's not, you know, romanticize our own faith. And that is, I think, an issue for, and I know this is a little book by Newell, but I think there is a real risk here of romanticizing the East or other traditions. And it's very easy to say, oh, aren't they wonderful, so peaceful. And yet this same non-attachment also can lead to violence. If you are not attached to anything, you no longer feel any fellow feeling with your human being in front of you, and therefore violence can ensue. And we know Buddhists can be violent. You know, it's not that peaceful. Any religion, given the right circumstance, can turn to violence, fostered by aspects of their own religious understanding. But Newell asks, is it possible for us at this stage in our Christian journey to cherish our own religious inheritance, but also to kind of let it go, to sit light to it? And he recounts a lovely story, which not enough time to tell you now, but if you get a chance to read the chapter, it's very beautiful, of having this time of realization, looking at the story of Mary Magdalene and the idea of Jesus saying to her, you know, don't hold on to me, I haven't yet risen to my Father, after the resurrection. And him making this kind of almost confession to his Jewish friend that Christians have held on to Jesus as if Jesus is our possession, whereas in fact Jesus is for the whole world. Hence the reading, the light that came to enlighten everyone. And we have held on and found and thought that, you know, this Christ is our possession. And he tells other stories too, which are lovely. I do recommend you read a chapter. And he particularly says that in a secularising world, although I suggest that it's really the West which is a secularising world, and even there, not so sure that's entirely true. It's not quite the straight line, ever-expanding secularism that many secularists would like to think it is. But he says we as religious people need people of other traditions, and he uses the example of the banyan tree. In a city in Florida, there were many banyan trees. They cut down the trees which had these secondary roots which go back down into the ground. And he said that they wanted to tidy them up, so they cut off all the secondary roots. And then the next time there was a hurricane, they all blew over. We need to earth ourselves in that same wisdom that other traditions have. That is what he is seeming to say. And he ends up by saying, we are on a journey, we need to go to the land that I will show you, as God said to Abram. To truly carry blessings for the world, whether as individuals or together as religious traditions, we are invited to move into new lands of awareness and wisdom. There we will be blessed, and there we will become blessings. And that is really his message. Feel free enough, secure enough in our own tradition to be able to move out and encounter the traditions of others with an attitude of blessing, of giving and receiving blessings. 2 caveats from me, and that's perhaps something that we want to talk about just for 5 minutes. I worry that the Christian tendency to colonise is still alive and well, and that we tend to Christianise other things. And there's great impulse, and people have said to me, well, you do mindfulness, why don't you do Christian mindfulness? And I want to say, but what's wrong with just mindfulness? And Tim Stead is a vicar in Oxford who does mindfulness, a similar sort of mindfulness approach to the one I have. And he says mindfulness is a way of making space for God. We don't need to Christianise things. We just need to recognise the wisdom that is there. But that is a terrible tendency that we have, even if we don't call it conversion. But there is also the equal tendency of the sort of the postmodern age that we are in to pick and mix. We take the bits that we fancy, don't we? Oh, I'll have a bit of, Anglo-Catholic ritual, and I'll have a bit of mindfulness and this, that and the other. I mean, people can look at Christianity and say, oh, I love the rituals. Great white wedding and fantastic things. Don't go much for this loving your neighbour malarkey, though. That's, don't think I'll go with that bit. We can easily take a few surface bits of another religion unless we really make a deep encounter with that other religion. It's too easy just to take a few bits without real understanding. And I think also there's a tension in Newell's writing. If we are Christians, whatever journey we have come to arrive here at St. Bride's, which is a place where we can question our Christian inheritance, what do we have to say about the Christ, about this person, Jesus? Is Jesus unique? For some Christians, that's a hugely important question, and in fact it's a given. The uniqueness of Christ is a given. Is that something we want to say? Does it matter if we think Jesus is not unique? And if we say we no longer hold that, Jesus is in this box and Jesus is unique and we have him and you don't. But seriously, if we want to say there is not, Jesus is a great spiritual teacher, there is something divine, I don't really understand what it is, but then the divine is in all of us. But are we still Christians? I don't say we have to put labels on ourselves. Does it matter how we describe Jesus? Does it matter to you how you think of Jesus? Do you think of Jesus? Do you turn that over in your mind? I do. It's something I think of all the time. Is Christianity taking a further step on its pilgrimage to maturity? Or are we drowning in a sea of faith? Discuss. On one side of the paper only. No, seriously, have 5 minutes just to talk to your neighbour, to 2 or 3 of you, and just say, what is unique about Christianity? And therefore, what is this gift that we can give? Do we actually have one? I will time you.